This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter, and I welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, February the 20th, 1960, the American national hockey team wins the gold medal. You may be thinking, wait a minute, aren't you talking about the 1980 team? No, I'm talking about the 1960 team, or as people call it, the forgotten Miracle on Ice, because let's face it, the Americans were not really that good at hockey. Well, except for a 1932 silver medal. Anyway, the Olympics were held at Squaw Valley, California. It's like, Squaw Valley? Really? Why would you have a Winter Olympics in California? It just doesn't make sense. Anyway, so there were 9 teams competing in the Olympics for hockey. The top 2 got to go to a 6-team round robin pool and all that. So Group A saw Canada and Sweden get in at the expense of Japan. The worst part for Japan was that they got their asses handed to them. In the 2 games against Canada and Sweden, they outscored 38-1. I kid you not, it was 38-1. Canada scored 19 goals on Japan, and Sweden did the same. The funny thing is that, Canada gave up a goal. So, yeah, it's funny how Japan scored a goal. And the only goal scorer was someone by the name of Atsuro Iri. What you got to remember with the 1960 Canadian team is that they had people like Bobby Russo. Harry Sinden was on that team. Floyd Martin. All that. It was huge. Canada had some good players. In Group B, the Soviets and the Germans, well, West Germany, I mean, got in at the expense of Finland. Finland weren't the top 6 power they are now, so. And the Americans and the Czechs qualified at the expense of the Australians. So the US and Czechs did it, but Australia scored 2 goals. Australia did better than Japan. They gave up only 30 goals. They gave up 18 to the Czechs and 12 to the Americans, but they scored twice in both games. So hey, in consolation rounds, Japan actually did quite well. They would face each other twice, but Japan beat Australia both times, 13-2 and 11-3. So Japan at least wasn't the worst team in the Olympics. In the meantime, it was down to 6 teams fighting it out. On February 28th, Canada beat the Soviets 8-5, which was huge. Sweden beat Germany 8-2. And then the US had to deal with the Czech Republic, or Czechoslovakia, I mean. You know what I mean, right? So the situation was this. The Americans were 4-0 headed to this game, and the Czechs were 2-2. If the United States scored a tie would have helped the Americans snake past Canada for gold. Canada was looking good for gold. And did I mention that Canada's 1960 team, before the National Program of Excellence by Father David Bauer, that Canada would be represented by a club team, and the club team to represent them in 1960, well, of course, amateurs were the Kitchener-Waterloo Dutchmen. That's right, Kitchener-Waterloo brought the 1960 Canadian team and the 1956 team too. So it was amazing that the KW Dutchmen actually represented Canada. So the Americans needed a point. The Czechs were 2-2. They needed a win to sneak past the Soviets for bronze. So they were ready to go in Squaw Valley. This game on CBS. The Czechs got off to a fast start. 8 seconds in, Jack McCartan gave up a key goal to Flatch. However, Olsen and McVeigh made it 2-1 for the Americans. Bubnek made it 2-2 for the Czechs. Then Roger Christian, yes, that Roger Christian, who was the uncle of Dave Christian, who played for the 1980 American Ice team, scored to make it 3-2. And Tommy Williams got an assist. Tommy Williams was the first practical American player. Was for many years he was the only American player in the NHL, if it seems. Unfortunately, Fonik made it 3-3 for the Czechs, and then it was 4-3 for the Czechs after Flash scored his second of the tournament. It looked good for the Czechs to win and deny America a gold medal, practically putting Canada on top of the medal podium. And the Czechs would sneak in to get the bronze ahead of the Soviets. However, what people forget is that the Soviet captain, I forgot what his name is. I would say Alexandrov, but I don't know what that captain was. No, Nikolai Suglobov. Yeah, so Nikolai Suglobov, who was the Russian captain, came into the U.S. Dressing room. Now you're thinking, wait a minute, he's a Soviet. Why would you go to the U.S. dressing room? Well, for good sportsmanship to help the Americans. After all, the Czechs and the Soviets were on different ends of the communism spectrum, and the fact of the matter is that Suglov knew that if the Czechs won, they would have bumped the Soviets off the medal rostrum. So he pantomimed to the American dressing room to grab oxygen, and it worked. The Americans scored 6 goals in the final period. Roger Christian scored, then Cleary, Roger Christian with the hat trick, and William Cleary, and then Roger Christian scored. So Roger Christian scored not 1 but 4 goals in the penultimate game, including a hat trick in the third period. The Czechs were like beside themselves, like, what the hell? How did this happen? But it happened. The Americans beat the Czechs and won the gold medal at Canada's expense, but whatever. So the Americans won gold with Canada taking second and the Soviets third. So in essence, it was a tight matchup. But in the end, the Americans got the gold medal they so crave and sticking it up Canada's behinds. The Americans took a surprise silver in 1972 in Sapporo, but after that, they weren't really that good at hockey. 64, 68, they weren't that good. 76, they weren't that good. And then you had the American Ice team in 1980. The Soviets would gain back their gold medal and become the dominant force of international hockey in the Olympics. Unfortunately, though, their so-called professional amateurs would rub Canada the wrong way. Canada refused to play in the Olympics and World Championships for years. Well, I mean, it's not sour grapes. It's just that, you wanted fairness. And the Soviets were just too damn good. But Canada should have looked at themselves in the mirror because from 1920 to 1952, they were dominant, only losing the gold medal to the Brits in 1936 because there were some ex-Canadians on that team. Look it up, people. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.